What is most directly relevant to you if you are between 18 and 40, working in a knowledge-based role? Anything involving writing, analysis, research, client work, code, coordination, or decision-making. And you have been watching the AI conversation from a distance, thinking, I'll pay attention when it actually affects me. That's the moment this video is about. Because the evidence is starting to come in, and the pattern it reveals is not the one most people expected. It is not. AI replaces workers. It is. AI raises the floor for everyone, and dramatically raises the ceiling for some. The workers who reach that higher ceiling are not necessarily the most technically skilled, the most experienced, or the ones with the most prestigious credentials. They share something different. And that difference is the subject of this video. There is a study from MIT, published in 2023, that looked at what happened when a group of knowledge workers were given access to an AI writing assistant for the first time. The results were not what most people expected. The lowest performing workers improved dramatically. Their output quality jumped. The gap between them and the best workers shrank noticeably. On the surface, this sounds like AI is a great equalizer, but look at what happened to the highest performers. They also improved. Their output got faster. Their range expanded. They started tackling work that previously would have been too time-consuming to attempt. So the gap between low performers and high performers narrowed slightly in terms of output quality, but it widened significantly in terms of output volume, speed, and scope. The researchers described this as AI leveling up the floor while raising the ceiling. Now here is the part most people skip past when they read this study. The high performers were not necessarily better at using the AI tool. They were better at something that existed before the tool arrived. The tool just amplified it. That is the mechanism this video is going to explain. To understand what is actually happening, you need to understand 4 steps. Each one causes the next. Step 1. AI collapses the cost of execution. For most of the last century, doing knowledge work at high volume required either a lot of time or a lot of people. Writing a detailed report took days. Researching a topic took hours of searching. Drafting variations of a proposal meant writing multiple drafts from scratch. AI collapses that cost. A task that took 3 hours can now take 20 minutes. A research process that required a team now requires one person with the right prompts. This sounds straightforwardly good. And in isolation, it is. But now watch what this collapse in execution cost actually does to the labor market. Think of it this way. If producing a unit of work now costs a fraction of what it used to, the value of the work itself has not necessarily changed, but the value of the person producing it has shifted. Specifically, execution skill, the ability to do the work technically, becomes less scarce. Everyone can now execute faster. What becomes more scarce is everything that sits above execution. Step 2. Judgment becomes the scarce resource. When execution is cheap, what differentiates outcomes is the quality of the decisions made before and after execution. Before, what problem are we actually solving? What question is worth asking? What approach is most likely to work? Which output to pursue? After, is this good? Does this actually solve the problem? What is missing? What should be changed? These are judgment calls. They require context, pattern recognition, taste, experience, and an understanding of what the work is actually for. AI, at its current stage, is extremely good at producing plausible outputs. It is not reliable at evaluating them. It does not know what your organization actually values. It cannot feel the difference between a technically correct answer and a useful one. A worker who can make those calls quickly, consistently, and accurately becomes more valuable as AI raises the volume of outputs being produced. You now need more judgment, not less, because there is more to evaluate. Here is the concrete example. A marketing team using AI can now produce 10 versions of a campaign brief in the time it used to take to produce one. That is not a problem for the person who can look at all 10 and immediately identify which one is actually right and why. that person becomes indispensable. For the person who cannot make that call, or who needs weeks of feedback cycles to develop that instinct, the volume increase becomes a source of noise, not productivity. Step 3. The gap compounds over time. This is where the split between the two groups of workers actually opens. The worker who is developing judgment, who is using AI to do more, see more patterns, get faster feedback on their decisions, is learning at an accelerated rate. Every project teaches them something. Every AI output they evaluate sharpens their calibration. The worker who is using AI primarily to move faster through the same work they were already doing, without stepping back to evaluate, to question, to build a model of why things work, is not compounding at the same rate. After 1 year, the gap is small. After 3 years, it is significant. After 5 years, it is structural. The first type of worker has built a body of judgment that is difficult to replicate quickly. The second type has become faster at execution, which is now the least scarce thing in the market. Step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. This is not about who is smarter. It is about a feedback loop. One worker is in a loop that produces judgment. The other is in a loop that produces output. Both loops are running at the same speed. The outputs look similar in the short term, but the trajectories diverge. Step 4. The market eventually reprices this. Labor markets are slow to reprice. They lag behind the underlying economics by years. This is actually a key part of the story. Right now, the two types of workers are being paid roughly the same. The split is not yet visible in salary data or job titles. This creates a false sense of stability for workers in the second group, and a significant opportunity for workers in the first group, who are building value that the market has not yet recognized. When repricing happens, and in technology-disrupted fields, it always does, it tends to happen suddenly. Hiring managers who have been watching quietly start to distinguish between the two types explicitly. Roles get restructured. Compensation bands shift. What was rewarded before, reliable execution of defined tasks, becomes table stakes. What gets rewarded now is judgment plus execution. The workers who built judgment during the window are positioned for that repricing. The workers who did not find themselves in a market that has moved around them. Here is what this looks like in practice. In second person, present tense. You are 3 years into your career. You use AI tools regularly. You are fast. You produce good work. You feel confident. But here is what you notice. When you finish a piece of work, you move on. You do not spend much time asking whether it was the right work. You do not go back and compare what you produced to what actually happened. You do not have a clear model of why some of your work lands well, and some does not. You trust your instincts, but you have not pressure tested them systematically. You are in the second loop. You are producing. You are not compounding. Now, consider a different version of those 3 years. Same tools, same speed. But after each project, you pause. You ask, what judgment calls did I make here? Were they right? What would I do differently? You keep a rough log of decisions and outcomes. Over time, you start to see patterns. You develop a sharper feel for which problems are worth solving, which briefs are underspecified, which directions are likely to fail. You are in the first loop. Your output looks similar to your colleagues, but your judgment is quietly becoming an asset. In year 1, no one can tell you apart. In year 5, the difference is obvious to you, to your employer, and eventually to the market. Distinguish between throughput and calibration. Throughput is the volume of work you produce. AI is very good at increasing your throughput. That is not the competitive advantage. Calibration is the accuracy of your judgment over time, your ability to make the right call. Faster, with less noise. Calibration is built deliberately. It requires closing the loop, making a decision, observing the outcome, updating your model. Most workers use AI to increase throughput. The workers who will be on the better side of this split use AI to increase the rate at which they can close loops, to run more experiments, see more outcomes, update their model faster. The practical habit this suggests is simple. At the end of any significant piece of work, spend 5 minutes asking one question. Not did I do this well? That is too subjective. Ask what judgment call was at the center of this work, and was it right? That question, asked consistently over years, is what builds calibration. It does not require extra tools. It does not require a course. It just requires the habit of treating your own decisions as data. That is the difference between workers who are using AI to go faster and workers who are using AI to get better. So here's the answer to the question this video started with. What separates the two groups of workers is not technical skill, credentials, or how aggressively they adopt new tools. It is whether they are in a loop that builds judgment or a loop that builds throughput. And that distinction is almost entirely a product of habit, not talent. The gap between those two loops is small right now, which means this is the window, the period before the market has fully repriced, when the choice of which loop you are in actually matters most. The compressed insight: AI raises the floor for everyone, but only compounds value for workers who are actively building judgment, not just accelerating execution. Now here's the question this video did not answer. If judgment is what compounds, what are the specific types of judgment that matter most in an AI-assisted workplace? And how do you know if yours is actually getting sharper or just feeling like it is? That is a different question, and it is the subject of the next video.